Is better? Okay, Board Member Abadamos, can you hear me okay? You're breaking up on your end. Still breaking up.
Now?
Sorry, I can hear you. You're loud enough. It's just breaking up.
I'm not sure. Maybe a different location in my house would be better.
You're right. Where you are right now sounds really, really good. It works. Loud and clear. Okay.
Okay.
All right. So hopefully you have a place where you can sit down in a comfortable place. Councilmember Oro, Board Member Oro, are you hearing me okay?
I can hear you fine. It could be better, but I think we can proceed.
Okay, very good. We will proceed. All right. Call the meeting to order. American Canyon Fire Protection District Board meeting for June 28, 2022. Please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you all. Please be seated. Roll call, please.
Board Member Joseph?
Here.
Board Member Oro? Board Member Washington?
Here.
Vice Chair Abodamos?
Here.
Chair Garcia?
Here. Thank you all. Moving on now in our agenda, report on closed session, confirmation of a reportable action. Mr. Ross?
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, you convened an open session at 5:05 p.m. to address the matters agendized for closed session consideration. You finished at 6:37 p.m. With respect to each of those matters, I will do a written report upon return from closed session consistent with Government Code Section 54.957.1. That would conclude a report unless there are questions.
Are there any questions from board members? Hearing none, we'll move on with our presentation this evening, proclamation presentation. We're going to be administering the oath of office to Chief Jeff Bellier. We're going to have a little recession after that. We'll take some time and do a little celebrating. Time for, I just want to give folks a heads up what's going on. Very good. So we'll move on. Oath of office for and badge pinning for Fire Chief Jeff Bellier, effective July 1, 2022.
Okay, Assistant Chief, can you raise your right hand and repeat after me? I, Jeff Bellier, do solemnly swear
I, Jeff Bellier, do solemnly swear
that I will support and defend
that I will support and defend
the Constitution of the United States
the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of California
and the Constitution of the State of California
against all enemies, foreign and domestic,
against all enemies, foreign and domestic,
and that I will bear true faith and allegiance
and I will bear true faith and allegiance
to the Constitution of the United
to
States
the Constitution of the United States
and Constitution of the State of California,
and the Constitution of the State of California,
that I take this obligation freely
that I take this obligation freely
without any mental reservation
without any mental reservation
or purpose of evasion,
or purpose of evasion,
and that I will well and faithfully
and I will well and faithfully
discharge the duties
discharge the duties
about which I'm about to enter.
about which I'm about to enter.
Congratulations, Chief.
All right, bravo. Okay. There you go.
Congratulations.
I can do a little description here for our remote attendees. We just have Chief Billy's got his wife and his 2 sons here, and that's a very great family moment as well. So thank you. Chief Billy.
Thank you, Chairman Garcia, and members of the board. First, I'd like to thank the members of the board for their confidence that they've instilled in me by selecting me to be the next chief of American Canyon. Chief Cahill, thank you. You've been, don't mind the little guy. You've been a great friend, a mentor, and someone that I've enjoyed working every day side by side with you. And you have put the district in an excellent position, and I will continue to carry forward the good work that you've done. One of the engines is out on a call, but for the crews that are here, thank you. Thank you for your confidence in me and your support. Members of the public, thank you. Thank you very much. Chief Greenberg and his wife Ryan. It's pretty cool that lifelong high school buddies have progressed. I'm not going to say how many years it's been since high school, but we're now both in positions where we get to every day ensure the safety of the public and the visitors here in American Canyon. City Manager Holly, thank you. Look forward to working with you. And just in closing, it's a pretty cool feeling for me to come back to serve and protect the community that I grew up in. My family moved here before American Canyon was actually incorporated into a city. And many years later, get to come back and be a part of continuing to make American Canyon a great place to live.
Thank you.
So thank you all.
Bravo. We'll recess now for a little bit so we can do appropriate family celebration. What does board members think? 15 minutes? 20? Then there's cake. That's right. That's part of the celebration. Okay, we'll return at, we'll try and return here at 7:15. That works. We're recessed.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Of course. Of course.
Thank you, Chairman Garcia and members of the board. Back in April, board member Joseph asked for a report or an update, some additional information with regards to what is called the 201 Act. It's a portion of the state EMS laws and how it's related to the fire district. And without spending a whole bunch of time explaining why Mark asked for that, but he attended a fire district meeting in Napa in which there were a number of presentations made with respect to fire districts' role and responsibilities and the state fire district's laws relationship to the provision of emergency medical services locally. Out of that, this short report was written to kind of bring the board up to date. There's been a number of conversations between myself and the board members during both, well, in open session and in closed session with regards to potential litigation and other things associated with our establishing to make sure that we're able to continue to provide the level of service to the community that we have been providing specifically since 2014, when the fire district went to an ALS delivery system. To kind of cut to the chase and get to this, there's a bit of rancor, frankly, that's been going on for the good part of 30 years between the fire service and state EMS and local EMS agencies over who determines the levels of service provided within communities. American Canyon, back when it was a volunteer fire department, even prior to 1957, when it was recognized as a fire district by the county and the state, was providing pre-hospital response, basic life support, emergency medical response in the community. We didn't transport folks in ambulances, but we did respond to calls for service when someone was either injured or needed medical attention within the district. That was things like advanced first aid, bandaging, setting broken bone, or not setting broken bones, but splinting broken bones, prepping patients before they were transported to the ER. That's been going on since this department was a volunteer department. When it became a paid department, that level of service increased along with the level of service that was being recognized by in the state of California by all fire departments, advanced first aid, EMT services, things like that. The issue at hand right now, though, is that Section 1797.201 of the Health and Safety Code states that upon the request of a city or fire district that contracted for or provided as of June 1st, 1980, which when the law was passed by the state legislature, provided pre-hospital emergency medical services, a county shall enter into a written agreement with the city or fire district regarding the provision of the pre-hospital emergency medical services for that city or fire district. Until such time that this agreement is reached, pre-hospital emergency medical services shall be continued at not less than the existing level, and the administration of pre-hospital EMS by cities and fire districts presently providing such services shall be retained by those cities and fire districts, except the level of pre-hospital EMS may be reduced where the city council or the governing body of a fire district pursuant to a public hearing determines that the reduction is necessary. So in 1980, when the state started this EMS law, it was about managing the delivery of pre-hospital care statewide. The issue really at hand is our laws, and our law specifically that defines what the fire district is legally able to provide in terms of services to the community, is independent of this state law. The state law references it, but it is essentially what it's done is, and the whole issue with the state, with 201, is about the fact that there's a difference of opinion between the fire service and the state and local EMS over who has the ultimate authority to determine the level of service provided in those jurisdictions. The county believes, and the state believes, that they have that authority based on this law. But if you read the section if you look deeper into the section I just read, it essentially says that as long as the city and district are providing the level of same service that they were providing prior to 1980, they can continue to provide that service. The issue that we're up against right now with the counties and the state is that they are trying to require the fire districts and the fire departments that are represented by the cities to enter into these agreements with the local EMS agency. It is our belief that if we enter into that agreement with the local EMS agency, and this is based on court actions that have taken place within the Superior Court and the state superior or the state Supreme Court findings, that case law is essentially said that if we enter into that agreement, we give away our authority to provide the level of service that you all determine needs to be provided in this community. As your fire chief, I recommend, and I think my predecessor recommended to the board also, that we don't enter into an agreement and give away what is our 201 rights based on what that law was written when it was put into place. Now, there is folks that believe that that law was written with the intention, the legislative intention behind it was that it was a temporary fix. And a temporary fix to allow us to continue to provide the levels of service. And ultimately, the state wanted to, through its local EMS agencies, determine the levels of service that we provide. But again, you folks provide, you make that determination. The health and safety code that allows the formation of the fire district is very clear about the fact that we have the authority to provide emergency medical services. There's a conflict between that law and the one that the EMS agency is using. And it's been litigated over and over again over the last 30 years with various folks taking sides, one side or the other, and courts, frankly, saying on one side that the state and the county have that authority, and on the other side that the local jurisdictions have that authority. But we're back at it again, and I just think that this is something that we need to keep you appraised of, because it's on the forefront right now, both in Sacramento and here locally in the community that we serve. So I'll answer any questions you might have with respect to that. My report's a little bit more comprehensive, but I think as I exit the district, unfortunately, I won't be able to provide much guidance at this after this coming Thursday. But Chief Bellier has definitely become very appraised of the issues associated with this issue with regards to who can determine the level of service that we provide here in American Canyon.
Questions from board members?
One clarifying question from what I understand then, because at one point I was told that if we just did basic level of service, that our 201 rights only existed if we were at the advanced life support in 1980. That was one way it was explained. But a strict interpretation of this code basically says, well, actually doesn't say what level. So again, any case law that helps clarify anything that says, hey, even though we did provide basic level of service, not advanced, not transport, but we're still subject or still eligible for our 201 rights as long as we haven't entered into any agreement? That either that's a question for the chief or our board counsel.
Excuse me, before we begin, David Oro, board member Oro lost sound. Can you see if can you hear me, David?
Board member Oral?
He said he got disconnected. David's no longer on the line.
Okay, we will call him in a moment.
So to summarize my understanding, looking at section 201, it isn't clear on what level of service was required, just as long, so is there any case law or any other clarification about what level you need to have?
I think the answer is it depends on the given factual situation. I'll forward to the entire board, for example, how the issue was initially addressed in Monterey County.
Your call has
claim.
been forwarded to an
one more,
automatic
please.
voice message.
But I think the summary that the chief gave raises the issue is 30 years, things haven't changed. And, you know, there is a need for clarity because the people who suffer are the aid recipients, usually because of response time. So I'll give a summary of cases that I think would be informative and send it to the board.
Okay,
Right?
thank you.
That would be helpful, I think, because I think we need to know what, there's been a lot of litigation on it. We'd like to know the outcome of that and its impact on our district.
And, and the other issue is, I guess it's SB 443, is currently a bill that's pending in our state legislature that would attempt to clarify things, I'm thinking, or, you know, or does it?
And that is the intention of the legislation that's being proposed, yes. And as you would, I guess, expect at this point in time, based on what Mr. Ross just shared with you and what I provided in this report, we are on different sides of the street with respect to that. The county has taken one side along with the state, and the cities and fire districts have taken another. They've taken the other side. There was a hearing that was supposed to happen today in Sacramento with a considerable amount of support from both sides. That because of some, I guess I would suspect, I wasn't there, I heard that there was a need on the part of the legislature to get some additional information based on some of the comments were made in the supporting documentation. I can tell you this. I wrote a letter representing the fire district, and it's in the packet here. The county of Napa also wrote a letter, which is 180 degrees off of what I was suggesting. So, I think this is not a statewide issue. This is a local issue, folks. This is happening here in Napa County, and we need to resolve this. And as many cases like this have been resolved or not resolved, things happen in Sacramento, and but eventually it gets to the local level, and we have to provide service to our community, and that is your responsibility as board members in this fire district to establish policy with regards to the services your fire department provides.
Excellent.
Yeah. So anyway, that's what this is about.
It's a bill for us to keep our eyes on.
Definitely so.
Thank you.
So we're going to provide the same level of a service that we have currently, even though this is going on in the background. Some result will come forward from it.
Yeah.
Am I hearing you correctly?
Yes, I mean, we have no intention of not continuing to provide the level of service we're providing right now. We'll
Right, so then
continue to do that.
I guess the message, as I'm understanding it for the board members, is we're not going to be any agreement that will affect the level of service we have right now.
That is my recommendation, and I think that will be the recommendation of your new chief also.
Okay. Very good. Any public comment on this matter?
No public comment.
Okay. Anybody in the audience want to comment on it? Okay, thank you. This is a informational item, so we'll move on to our agenda at this point. Okay. Well, thank you for that presentation. That's informative. And it's an old saying that I shared a time or two. I learned from a friend, coworker. When elephants fight, the grass suffers. And I don't want to be the grass. But unfortunately, there are those who have seem to have, in their own mind, more authority than we do. Moving on. Public comment. Any public comment on items not on the agenda?
No public comment.
Okay. Anybody from the attending in the audience want to comment? Then I will close public comment on those matters, and we'll go on in agenda changes. If not, I'll accept the motion for the consent calendar.
So moved.
So moved.
And I'll second.
Motion second. Roll call, please.
Board Member Joseph?
Aye.
Board Member Oro?
Yes.
Board Member Washington?
Yes.
Vice Chair Abudamos?
Yes.
Chair Garcia?
Yes. Thank you, Board. We'll move on now to public hearings. Item 15, preliminary budget fiscal year 2022-23. Recommendation, hold a public hearing and adopt a resolution approving the preliminary budget for the American Canyon Fire Protection District for fiscal year 2022, 2020, that should be 2023. Typo there.
Chairman Garcia and board members present and on phone, it's my pleasure this evening, as probably my last official fire chiefly duty here, is to recommend this proposed budget to the board. Our financial consultant, Ken Campo, will make the presentation.
Thank you, Chief. Is this on? Chairman Garcia, members of the board, as the Chief Cahill mentioned, we're here to present the preliminary budget for fiscal year 22-23. Start with just a quick overview. First, we'll go over the monthly financial report that we provide, that I provide to the district. This will be through the month of May as kind of a check-in on where the district is vis-a-vis its budget to date for the current fiscal year. And we'll take a look at the preliminary budget for fiscal 22-23. We'll cover the general operating fund and review of the other district's funds. Then we have an updated financial forecast. And then we'll look at the capital funds of the district. So with that, I think we'll get started. There we go. So we'll look at the monthly financial report through the month of May. We'll start with the general fund reserves, or the general operating fund reserves. I think the board is familiar generally with this chart. The bars represent the ending fund balance for the general operating fund as we progressed through the year. The green line going across the top represents the budget and where we expect that ending balance to be as we progress. The blue line going across the top is where we were in the previous year. So the bars, you'll see the brick area at the bottom. That represents the district's contingency reserve. That's set at 20% of operating expenditures. So that's a hard reserve that the district cannot dip into without board authorization. The blue kind of wavy area at the top of the bar represents the operating reserve, if you will, of the district. And that's set at generally each year at about 50% of ongoing revenues. You see the current year we're at about $6.1 million total reserve funds. Last year at this time we're about 6.5 million. So that's down a little bit from last year. And you can see how that operating reserve gets used throughout the year, right? We start out in July. The operating reserve, the brick component stays constant throughout the year, so that's about $1.2 million. We start out in July with an operating reserve of about 3.4 million. By November, that's drawn down to about 1.6, and you can see it jumps back up when we get the December property tax payment. And then we kind of draw that down, and then it goes back up with the April property tax payment. So we get to May, and that balance is about $4.8 million. And when we look at the cash on the next slide, Oh, I should say that when we look at May, at the top of the bar, we're right at where the green line is, so it's kind of, the actual results are right where we expected to be through May. So next is a look at the general fund cash. So this kind of follows that same pattern. You can see it kind of goes down as we're drawing down that operating reserve, and then it bounces back up in December with the property tax payment, and again in April. We're at about $6.3 million through May in cash. It's a cash balance at the end of May, which is about the same as where it was last year. I point out on this slide that you'll see the high mark for cash last year was about $6.6 million in April, with that April property tax payment. And then the low point this year, by the time we got to November, it was down to about $2.8 million. So that's roughly about a $4 million drop from April of the prior year to November of 21. So April of 20 to November of 21. That's what we call the dry period, where we have to have cash on hand. That's that $4 million drop. That's about $500,000 a month. That's what we have as the cash burn rate, if you will. No pun intended. But we need to have that amount of cash, about $4 million available in April to carry us through to November, and that number will grow as the budget grows. Right? So, salaries and benefits through May. You see, we're right on track. Again, the brown line going across represents the current year. The green line represents the budget, so we're pretty much right on track through May. I just point out here that the current year we have about 230,000 of strike team deployment costs, compared to about 390,000 last year. So less activity this year than last year. So the next slide is the overall expenditures for the general operating fund, and you can see it pretty much tracks right along with salaries and benefits. Salaries and benefits make up about 83% of the operating costs, so it's expected that it would follow along. Slightly under budget through May at $6.3 million. And then this last slide, we take a look at where we are in terms of general operating fund revenues. Again, we're right on target. In May, you see the brown dot is right there at the green, which is right where we expect to be. We have about the same revenue through May of this year as we did last year. Last year we had about $800,000 in strike team reimbursements. This year about $480,000. So again, reflecting that lower level of strike team activity. And I'll just point out now that the district is not expecting really much strike team deployments at all next year, just given the current staffing situation. So with that, we'll move on into unless there's any questions from the board, we'll move into the preliminary budget.
Any questions from the board members at this point? Hearing none, please continue.
Ken, just real briefly, I think it's important to note that one of the reasons the revenues look lower this year is because there was a delay in the property taxes that haven't been reflected. Is that correct from our last subcommittee meeting?
Well, you notice here that in the month of April, we were below where we expected to be, and that was the delayed April property tax payment that didn't get recorded until May. So I think I mentioned to the Finance Committee that I expected that to bounce back up in May and be back
I do recall that
track.
discussion, yes.
Yep. Thank you, Chief.
Do we know if that actually happened now that we're almost through in June?
Well, we did receive the
Okay.
payment. It was delayed. Instead of coming in
Oh.
April, it came in May.
Oh, okay. So it has arrived?
Yes.
Okay, good.
Yep. Okay, and I know the board is familiar with this, but just for the public and those maybe listening in, the general operating fund of the district accounts for those core services that the district provides, fire suppression, EMS services, urban search and rescue, mutual aid, training, lots of fire prevention, public education activities, apparatus and facilities maintenance, and of course the administration of the district. All of those are provided through the general operating fund. Other funds the district maintains, the Fire Mitigation Fee Fund. This accounts for the voter-approved special tax on development. It's a little different than a mitigation fee. It's for specialized fire equipment and make sure that there's stations are maintained. And I just mentioned that this development, it's not a development impact fee, it's a special development tax, but there is a aerial ladder fee that's layered on top of it, which is more of a development impact fee. And we'll be talking a little bit more about that later in the presentation. So all of those funds that are collected go into the Fire Mitigation Fee Fund, and then those monies are transferred to the capital fund as they're needed to make capital purchases, which happens out of the Fleet Facilities and Equipment Replacement Fund. This fund is funded by an ongoing transfer from the general fund and then transfers as needed from that mitigation fee fund. The purpose of that is to maintain the significant investment that the district has in its capital infrastructure and to promote safety to the community and safety to the employees of the district, and to help promote long-term stability by having these capital funds available when needed so we don't disrupt operations. And then just some guiding principles for the budget. We're focused on maintaining the long-term sustainability of the district. We do that by making sure we are aware of the unfunded liabilities and that those are being addressed, primarily retirement, retiring medical benefits, and major capital needs of the district. So getting a handle around all of those things and being aware of those is important to the fiscal sustainability of the district, as well as utilizing long-range planning tools so that we can understand the impact of decisions made today over the next 5 to 10 years for the district. So we do maintain a long-range financial forecast model that we'll be looking at later, and a capital improvement plan where we try and plug in those major expenditures that we're aware of over the next 5 to 10 years. And I think we'll need to add to this a district master plan that's being worked on now to make sure that that's built, that master plan stays updated. Maybe every 4 or 5 years we go back and take a look at it. And we're talking about we'll talk some more about that later too. Okay, now the really fun part, we start getting into some numbers.
Before we do that, I just have a question
Yes,
on
sir.
the, if you go back a slide, you have the CalPERS, OPEB. I've raised this before. I'm on the League of California Cities Governance, Transparency, Labor Relations. We deal with the CalPERS issues on that. And the last discussion was a consideration of lowering the discount rate, which means the city's going to have to pay in more based on what stocks are doing in their investment portfolios. Do you have any information on that?
I've heard the same thing, and
Okay.
I know they're looking for opportunities to lower the discount rate, and they did. Actually, they did last year when they
Yes.
had some significant investment returns, and I think upwards of 23%. That triggered a plan that the CalPERS board put in place a number of years ago to start bringing that discount rate down. So I think they dropped it 20 basis points, if I'm not mistaken, something
Well,
like
that
that, from
means-
7 to 6.8.
What that translates into to us, as I understand it, is that we have to contribute more. Back to our budget.
Well, but it's, the reason they put this plan in place is they said if we earn more than what we expect to earn, then we'll take some of that
Yeah.
difference and buy down the discount rate.
Okay,
So just on that one change alone, I think the district will still benefit from the higher earnings in terms of lowering its rate. It just won't benefit as much as it would have had they not made that adjustment to the discount rate.
just the stock market seems to be going through another one of those.
I was gonna say,
So-
now that I said that, you could take that and like throw it out the window.
Yeah. Well, it's just, I was appointed to that committee at a point where it was looking pretty good, dire for everybody. I mean, at the state level, they got enough cash to be able to absorb it. Some jurisdictions are really on the brink of bankruptcy with that at that time.
I'm sure Board Member Joseph can remember the days at CalPERS when they said, focus on the 60-year horizon, the long-term horizon,
Yeah.
and don't get too caught up in the year-to-year fluctuation.
Yeah.
Because they earned 23% last year, and this year they, I don't know what it's going to end up with at June 30, but it's not going to be pretty.
Yeah.
But those things tend to offset, and that's CalPERS is taking another strategy of amortizing those gains and losses in over a period of time, so they're not hitting all at once like they used to. It
Yeah, they're
really drive rates up
looking
and
at
down.
30-year projections now, further out. Yeah, okay.
That said, we'll take a look a little bit later. The PERS costs are actually going down a little bit for the district.
Okay, good.
And I think we're 75% of the firefighters are now Pepper employees.
Mhm.
So that's making a big difference. I mean, it's good in terms of pension costs, but it also means you got a lot of really young folks in the district. Okay, this is just an overview of all of those funds. So this is general operating fund, mitigation fee fund, and the fleet facilities and equipment fund. Less any transfers, so we're not doubling up on numbers. But again, we want to make sure through this budget that our operations are fiscally sustainable as we move forward, and we're meeting the safety needs of the community, and that the firefighters have the appropriate resources to work safely and effectively. So again, this is all those funds combined, and you see total revenues estimated for this year at $6.9 million, with expenses at $6.8 million. So district-wide, we're looking at adding about $100,000 overall to district resources. And when you look at fiscal 22-23, combined revenues of $8.9 million and combined spending of $9.4, we're looking to draw down resources of the district by about $500,000. And some of that's capital-related purchases, and some is to go toward operations, and we'll get into the details. Now, I'll point out here, though, that we're still waiting to hear what the final cleanup property tax payment is, which usually comes in right around the end of June, so it should be any day now. Some of the other districts I work with have seen some pretty large final supplemental cleanup payments from last calendar year. So we're hoping that maybe with that, there's some added revenue there that'll even make the 21-22 numbers look a little better. And I'll just mention that I'm just going to briefly go through the budget here, but your packet includes your staff report and the budget worksheets that provide much greater explanation and detail for the budget. So this next slide is just the general operating fund. So the same sort of layout here. You can see estimated revenues for this current year, $6,644,000 versus expenses of $6,904,000. So it's about a $260,000 deficit that's projected for this year. That's use of reserves to help cover operations. The preliminary budget for 22-23 is revenues of $6,533,000 and expenses of $7,165,000 for a projected deficit of about $632,000 for 22-23. The difference in revenues is that strike team that we were talking about. Where last year or this year is about $500,000. I think it was $480,000, and we're not projecting any strike team revenue in 22-23. So that's why it looks like there's a kind of a drop in revenue there. I'd also point out that this time last year, when we were doing the preliminary budget for 21-22, we were projecting a deficit of about $400,000. So, like good government finance people, we tend to overestimate expenditures and underestimate revenues. We don't want to come up short. But that $632,000 deficit is pretty much consistent with our prior discussions about maintaining the 6.0 staffing level and using overtime to do that. Now we're plugging in bodies to maintain that 6.0 staffing rather than just relying on overtime. Any comments on that, Chief? Chiefs?
I think that's, again, last year when we went through our budget process, the board approved bringing on 2 additional bodies, and then with the intention of bringing on a 3rd this year. So that's what you're seeing in this year's budget, that 3rd position. Mm-hmm. I guess the best way to state this is that, overtime was a quick fix, a Band-Aid. Having the permanent positions, having the 6.0 staffing, the permanent firefighter positions on the engine companies is super important, given our staffing issues that we're dealing with right now. If we were continuing to do overtime, doing it through overtime, we'd be even more significantly underwater. So I just suggest that this is the right thing to do this year, and we'll talk more about that in the future. But I think that that's definitely the right move.
Thank you, Chief. Okay, moving on to a little more of the detail. General operating fund revenues, $6.5 million. The bulk of that is property taxes, as we discussed, $5.4 million. It's about 82% of the projected revenues. Then we have the fire and assessment fees at $752,000, which is about 12% of revenues. So combined, 94% of funding comes from those 2 sources, and then we have a myriad of other revenues that comprise the balance. I should mention that property taxes, it represents about a 4.5% increase, I think, is what we plugged in for next year. Now this next slide is one I just kind of like to show for historical purposes. Again, this is looking at those 2 major revenues that make up about 94% of the district's projected revenues of property taxes, which are the light bars on the top, and then the darker colored bar at the bottom is the fire assessment fee. Those fire assessment fees are based on EDUs, or equivalent dwelling units. So as the number of housing units grows and commercial development, then that revenue grows. And you can see it doesn't, it doesn't fluctuate like property tax revenue, which is based on assessed valuation. You can see from about 2009 to 2016, I mean, that was the recessionary period. It took that long to get back to where, it took to 2016 to get back to where the district was in 2009. So it took about 7 years for that property tax to recover, which is more or less an indication of how bad things can get during a major recession. And then starting about 2013, there's 10 years of sustained property tax growth. We're hoping that continues on, and then gets a little steeper when we get projects like Watson Ranch coming on and some of the other major commercial development. Now, on the expenditure side, the proposed spending is $7.2 million. Salaries and benefits is the largest component of that at $6 million. It's about 83% of overall spending. Services and supplies to keep everything going is another $946,000. It's about 13%. I kind of look at this and I think, property taxes are 82% of the revenue, and salaries and benefits, 83%. Fire assessment fees, like 12%, services and supplies, 13%. So those two revenue sources cover, the main operations of the district, and then the other revenue covers the capital transfer to the FF&E fund, or Fleet Facilities and Equipment Fund. And we'll get into a little more detail on these. So salaries and benefits are up about $55,000 overall. This does reflect pretty much full funding for all the positions, even though we know there's a number of vacancies. And it includes a couple of BC positions for half a year that we'll talk about as well. So salaries are $3 million of that, and it's up about $473,000 over the current year because of these additional positions, and assuming that they're fully staffed. Overtime, we have plugged in at $450,000. That's down about $225,000, but there's no strike team costs in there, and we're assuming a little bit. If we have positions filled, we're not going to have as much overtime, so we could very well get to mid-year and need to make some adjustments between salaries and overtime, depending on how quickly those positions get filled, the vacant positions. So retirement costs, so the CalPERS costs, net of the cost share the district has in place is about $1.1 million, and that's down slightly, right? It's down about $25,000, and that's even assuming these positions are filled. Again, I think that's a reflection of just some investment gains over the last several years, and the fact that the folks that you're bringing on board now are more Pepper employees than they are legacy employees. Active medical, $443,000. That's up about $92,000. Again, assuming all positions are filled for the year. The retiree medical is the full annually actuarially determined contribution. That is both the actual premiums paid for retirees plus a set aside into the OPEB trust fund that's maintained with CalPERS. Funds being set aside to pay these benefits in the future. And then workers' compensation at about $330,000. This is up higher than years past. It's consistent with last year because there were a lot of workers' comp injuries, and we still have, Chief, I believe there's still 1 or 2 people out on workers' comp. So we just left that number the same. Now, looking at the services and supplies budget, what's being proposed is pretty much in line with what we're experiencing this year. There was an increase in legal fees, about $35,000. There's some anticipated costs there, but otherwise, the rest of these items are pretty much in line with where they are this year. There is a new line item of $15,000 for an Explorer program.
Yeah.
I think this is a restart of a program that existed at one point here in the district. It's an opportunity to maybe do some recruiting locally from the community, kind of a grow your own kind of concept there. Chief, any thoughts on that?
Sure. There's, again, that I think Ken nailed that one, but it's your board has made it real clear to me that you want to see more diversity in our workforce, and you want our workforce to be more representative of the community. This is the way you do it. We've got to get to the young folks before they make decisions about career opportunities. We have had a good program in the past because, you know, COVID didn't help us, and we got out of it mostly during the COVID period. We have our firefighter, Robert Rojas, who is actually one of our firefighter paramedics who actually came from the Explorer program, has agreed to take on the program for us, and we're excited about what he's got planned, and we think that there'll be frankly, this $15,000 is seed money to get him started, but I think it'll pay off with getting younger folks, interested in becoming firefighters in this community.
Great. Thank you, Chief. Okay, so this next slide is our financial forecast. There's a lot going on here. The board has seen this before. The lines going across the top, the blue line represents revenues. The orange line represents expenditures. The green bars represent the projected ending general operating fund balance at the end of each of these fiscal years. If the bar is growing, that means that there's a surplus, an operating surplus. If the bar is going down, then we're using those reserve funds to cover operations. And you can see from 2021, you know, it starts declining there. And that's consistent with what we've shown before in trying to maintain that 6-0 staffing with the two engine companies. The brick at the bottom, again, is the contingency reserve. It's set at 20% of operating expenditures to make sure that's the rainy day reserve fund for the district. That blue wavy area is the operating reserve, 50% of general fund revenues. And you can see those amounts grow over time as the budget grows, and that's because they're set as a percentage of revenues and a percentage of expenditures. So as the budget grows, then those reserve requirements grow as well. This assumes, again, the one additional firefighter position for 22-23 that the chief just mentioned previously. It also includes 2 battalion chief positions that would be hired around July 1. So there's budget in here for 6 months for 2 BC positions. There's an arrow pointing down to 24, 25, or 23, 24. That's when the full cost of those 2 BC positions would kick in.
Ken, could I just interrupt real quick?
Yes. So
You mentioned that those BC positions were going to start July 1. They actually
I'm
start
sorry, January.
January 1, and
I'm sorry.
that's the 6 month window that we're proposing.
Thank you. This also assumes revenue from Watson Ranch development. We'll start seeing that revenue in fiscal year 23-24. So that's kind of why you see the revenue line start to grow at the rate it's growing. So we're phasing in those projects. Can't remember exactly how many homes there are now, but we have it phasing in over about a 5-year period, I believe. We just got some updated information from the developer on housing prices, so we plugged those in. We had some data in there that was, from 2018, so we were able to update that with this latest information. So you can see our reserve funds dip down. They actually start dipping down below that blue area, but then it starts growing at a fairly rapid rate after that. So both, it increases both property tax revenue and that fire assessment fee that's based on the EDUs. The base property tax growth is in the 3 to 4% range, and then layered on top of that is the Watson Ranch property tax revenue. We just started including that revenue, when it got closer to that project actually getting started. And now I think it's pretty much well underway, at least the initial phase. This does not assume any additional property tax revenue from commercial development. It's only the residential side, and doesn't include any of the projected development out along Green Island Road and that commercial development. So I feel pretty comfortable that I think these numbers are fairly conservative. Salaries we plugged in the salary increases built into the MOU, which is about 3% through 23-24, and then we have similar levels of increases going out. So I think this is consistent again with what we've shown in the past. The only difference here really being the battalion chief positions. Chief, anything you'd like to add on that? Nope.
I think I'm fine for right now.
Okay. And if the board has any questions, feel free.
Hey, Ken, real quick question.
Yes, sir.
You mentioned where you had the 94% projected revenues. I'm just kind of curious of an example of what the 6% might be. What would be another revenue source?
The fire prevention side of the house, so plan check fees, inspection fees.
Like admin stuff?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
And then the AMR reimbursement.
Okay.
There's a city reimbursement of $50,000, and I think AMR is like 60 something thousand now.
Yeah, it's
Okay.
yeah, and then we also, we have the board approved EMS first responder fees also that.
How could we forget that one?
Yeah, they're built into that. So.
Okay.
Yeah, that fee was that first responder fee was kind of geared toward hiring additional, hiring an additional BC position or some additional position.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, so we talked a little bit about the fire mitigation fee. We're projecting revenues of $478,000. I think this is conservative. We typically look back 5 years and do an average. That's about $266,000. Then we added in an additional $200,000 for the Watson Ranch development. In total, it's going to be, a much higher number, but it's just a matter of how soon or how quickly building permits are pulled. We're proposing to spend $20,000. No, there's no transfer needed this year into the Fleet Facilities and Equipment Fund for capital expenditures, but we are proposing $20,000 to be spent for a a mitigation fee update that would be based on the master plan. And I apologize, I should back up to the discussion of the BCs. One of the reasons that's set for January is, again, to allow that, to make sure it's consistent with the results of that master plan study, and also to let us gauge the impact of any possible recession on the district. We'll have our property tax number by then from the county assessor, so we'll have a much better handle on property tax revenues. We'll have a better handle on any depth or breadth of a recession, and then we'll have the results of the master plan to make sure that those positions fit within that master plan. And again, this $20,000 we're proposing would be spent on a mitigation fee update to make sure that we're able to serve all of this new development that's coming to the district. The projected ending balance at the end of 22-23 in the fire mitigation fee fund would be about 1.7 million, or 1,674,000. Then next we have the Fleet Facilities and Equipment Fund. We're projecting revenues of about $2 million. This would include the biggest piece would be equipment lease proceeds. We're proposing a lease purchase of 2 Type 1 fire engines. And we'll talk about that in a moment. But total revenues, again, $2 million would be, we saw that general fund transfer of $179,000 earlier. So that would come into this fund. We have the $50,000 from the Napa Logistics Park. That was $50,000 a year for 10 years, and we're in year 4 or so now. And again, the equipment lease proceeds. Proposed spending is $2.4 million. Spending on fleet is proposed at about $2 million. This would include 2 Type 1 fire engines. We budgeted about $900,000 each for the Type 1 engines. 2 command vehicles, about $90,000 each. This would tie in to the BC positions if those are approved by the board. And 1 rescue boat at $20,000. I think the Zodiac that the district has now is outlived its useful life. So it needs to be replaced if that program is going to continue. Other equipment, $220,000. It's new radios to replace existing radios, about $140,000, and then station alerting. I think that's the James Road station, new station alerting system, about $60,000. And then some spending on facilities, and then equipment lease payment of $156,000. That's we're assuming a half-year payment for 22-23, so that's about $312,000 a year, full year payment. The equipment lease we're proposing would be a 7-year lease, and we think all of that $300,000 a year for that can be covered through the combination of the transfer from the general operating fund and the mitigation fees that will be coming in. So there should not be any impact otherwise on the operating fund. And then when that's done, we expect this fund to have about $60,000 at the end of the year. Okay. And that concludes my presentation. So the recommendation would be to hold the public hearing, take any comments from the public and from the board, and then approve the resolution adopting the preliminary budget.
Board members ready for the public hearing? I'll open the public hearing at this time. Anybody from the public wishing to comment?
Beth Marcus, I just have one question. Do the hotels and the new gas station, do they provide any revenue to the fire department anyway?
I think it's property tax.
Just,
Property taxes, that's it?
Yeah.
yeah, just property tax, Beth.
I guess we need to build more.
Yeah,
Well,
in the
You're gonna have
impact
to go
fee.
over and do some inspection over there as well, right?
Yeah.
So,
Yes, but we're not getting TOT
Yeah.
or, or sales tax associated with those. That's, the city gets that, but
Yeah.
yes. We're primarily, our special tax and fees associated with it, whatever we do, inspections and things like that, and then property tax. But significant property tax, folks, considering the assessed value of those buildings.
It'd be property tax, fire assessment fee, and mitigation fees.
Any other public comment? Do we have anybody online wishing to comment?
No.
Nobody in the queue?
No.
No one in the queue, okay. Well, then I would say we have our public comment on the matter. I'll close public comment, return to the fire board for further discussion. If, as needed. And we do have a resolution.
Well, actually, I had one question to do with the radios. I know you mentioned the radios, but I also heard from talking to some of the firefighters, and I think Chief Jeff, you know, I have had a conversation about it, that there's issues with connectivity, issues with having dead spots throughout the city. And in my mindset, that's a safety issue for our firefighters. Is that taken into account of what you were doing, or is that something, would that be a different?
So that is more of an infrastructure issue in regards to Napa Central Dispatch.
Okay.
The one thing that's very important about the radios that we're proposing is they're what's called multi-band radios, so they can government agencies use different radio bands or different frequencies for their communications. So as an example, Vallejo, about the time I first got here, had a catastrophic radio system failure.
They did.
So they went to eBrixa, which is the East Bay Regional Communications Agreement. So it's a higher band frequency. So the current radios that we had, we were unable to talk to them. We could listen to them, but we had no way to talk to them, which obviously presents significant issues when you have firefighters going inside a burning building that can't talk to anyone on the outside. So what these radios do, because they're multi-band, they really set us up for any future radio changes either in the county or through our mutual aid partners that we respond to, because we'll now have one radio that can transmit and receive across a spectrum of radio frequencies. And it's also important to note that we just received $60,000 in grant funding from the County of Napa to purchase 6 radios. So the idea is we would have, with this purchase, with some of the radios that we have from Vallejo on a permanent loan, that would allow us to outfit every firefighter with their own radio, and give us the opportunity to have 2 in case one breaks down while it goes to get repaired. We still have that radio communication. And the current deployment that we have on the radios, the older Bendix Kings, which are probably about 15 years old, it's 1 for every riding seat on each piece of apparatus. So by the time we crunch the numbers and so forth, we'll actually be drawing down our radio inventory by assigning them to each individual instead of each apparatus per riding seat. So, yeah, that's the proposal, but the radios will help us communicate across a wide variety of radio bands, but some of the dead spots, if you will, that's an infrastructure through Napa Central and their communication system.
Okay. Thank you. And the cost that you came up with includes these new radios?
Yes, sir.
Okay, that's what, okay.
Yes, sir.
Good, thank you.
Board Member Joseph?
Yes, overall, I'm pleased with the budget proposal, but I am a little concerned about how fast we're growing here, because there are a lot of red flags in front of us. As you mentioned, there's probably a better chance of a recession than not at the national level. There's also the possibility, with interest rates going up, impacting our residential market. So even though we've approved a lot of homes at Watson Ranch and the developer has every intention to move forward, if the market gets too challenging, you know, buyers go away, we can't build what we can't sell, and projections start to go sideways. Particularly concerning is Measure L didn't pass. So some $400 to $700 a year just went away. So for me, when you add all those things up, it's a red flag to start investing in ongoing costs. So, you know, the equipment you're looking at is fine, the radios and so forth, but then we get into the labor costs. And I'm glad that we've committed to the extra staffing for firefighters, and I think we need to follow through and get that third position started, and for a whole variety of reasons. But with the 2 battalion chiefs, I would like to suggest that we spend a little bit of time thinking that through. I certainly appreciate the idea that it's essentially a mid-year project so that you do get a chance to see it, and that is a very good way of giving yourself as much time before you pull the trigger, so to speak. But we might want to also look at our management staffing strategy, or staffing in general. We're adding, you know, we have the chief, we have the assistant chief, we're now trying to add 2 battalion chiefs and ultimately 3, and I get that bridge concept. But if we're struggling financially, do we want to ask ourselves, what would the operation look like if you had the battalion chiefs and at least temporarily didn't fill the assistant chief? And by that meaning that some of the more important functions of the assistant chief might be allocated to the battalion chiefs. For example, you know, training functions might be given to one of the battalion chiefs. I don't know some of the other functions of the assistant chief, but simply put, to try to figure out a way to bridge from where we're at now to where we will be before we begin entering those ongoing labor costs. Again, because I'm concerned that there's getting to be more reasons why these numbers won't happen than that they will. And I'm particularly concerned that this year we're projecting a small operating deficit. Historically, the fire district's budgeted a deficit and then ends up with a surplus, and that's the way you like it to happen. Here, we're seeing the opposite, and we're seeing a bigger deficit next year than we normally see. So from my perspective, all the signs are pointing to caution, and that's why I'm a little uncomfortable with the 2 battalion chiefs for right now. And I appreciate we're putting them on a hold, and I would certainly like to, you know, look at the numbers and see where things stand in 6 months before we actually go out and recruit. But I'd also like to have a little bit of discussion or analysis as far as the management staffing, and can we do something different with that to help bridge us from where we're at now to where we want to be. I'm not necessarily saying there shouldn't be an assistant chief and ultimately 3 battalion chiefs. My question is, you know, how do we get there if the money starts drying up? If all these red flags turn into real crises, how do we get there? So that's my question.
Well, if I might, Chief, just some general overview type comments. We struggled with that same question, right? So it's a matter of wanting to be in front of the development and not trying to catch up in terms of your fire safety, fire and EMS safety services. But you don't want to get so far out in front that you're running these major deficits and you stumble along the way, and then the property tax revenue doesn't come in. So it's, you know, how far do you push that envelope? And with that, I'll turn it over to the chiefs.
I appreciate Board Member Joseph's comments, and I've lived in that world, and I've lived in the battalion chief world, and I've given up battalion chief's position or administrative chief officer positions for battalion chief's positions. What I will tell you is that they can share, as you said, you know, you could say the battalion chief will take care of training, but the battalion chiefs work on shifts, and they are not available to the chief for the administrative level of services that you have an expectation for, frankly. And so and Jeff and I have talked about this in great depth because, you know, it looks from 30,000 feet above this, it looks like, well, maybe you could just go without the assistant chief and just go with the 3 battalion chiefs. And we have the department I came from over in Sonoma County. That's essentially how they ended up. And I'd love to have the fire chief here tonight to share with you his experiences of being the fire chief in a department where he has chief officers that take care of the on-duty shift work, but are not available to him or to the board to do the level of administrative work that is expected. And he suffers because of that, frankly, and the district does. Now, that being said, we are not suggesting that we're going to go out and put these folks on the street if we can't afford them. And that's always going to be the issue that we're going to have to address. And cautiously, as Ken says, we're being very cautious with respect to this. But I would ask the board to consider the fact that by doing something like that, Mark, you're going to short suit your district administrative abilities. And that's, you know, we're a small department. We rely on, I mean, right now, Chief Bellier and I are covering emergency response off duty. Okay, that comes with the size of this department. It takes both of us, because we don't live in the community, it takes us a minimum of 20 minutes to get here. And a lot of things can happen within 20 minutes on an emergency scene. And we're asking our fire captains on those engines to be the incident commander and making those kinds of calls. From a safety perspective, they need to have someone on scene to be able to make those kinds of decisions, those higher level decisions, and those emergency command decisions. The other thing I've shared with you more recently that we also need to have, we need to have a person on duty who is responsible for the district's supervision of the district's employees. And one station was one thing. We go to 2 stations, and eventually we're going to potentially have 3 stations in the district. That's just another need for that kind of supervision. And that's what the battalion chiefs would give you, and certainly give your fire chief the ability to do a better job of supervising the on-duty staff and the work that they do. So, but I totally agree with where you're coming from with the standpoint we can't get ahead of ourselves with regards to something we can't pay for. And I think being cautious is definitely the way to go. We're trying to be that cautious also, but we believe that we need to suggest that we move in this direction sooner versus later, frankly.
Okay. The other way of asking the question is, if we add the positions and the numbers don't come through, what do we have to do to unravel that? I mean, short of just laying them off, which I wouldn't be an advocate of, but, you know, what's our plan B? I mean, for example, I think over the years I've asked questions like, you know, if things don't work out, what are our options? And in some cases, at the firefighter level, unfortunately, there's enough turnover and things happen that you can kind of reset your staffing levels and work it that way. So that would be the other question, is if we go ahead, if it looks good for the next 6 months or 12 months and we move forward with it, and then things go sideways, what's our backup plans? What strategies do we have in mind to kind of address things that could go sideways? For example, not that I believe in using one-time resources for ongoing costs, but you could look at your reserve levels. You could talk about other ways of handling the cash flow scenarios. So I guess that's the other thing I would be looking forward to in our 6-month review of where things stand, is addressing that what-if scenarios so that we have some reasonable kinds of backup plans. Because again, I am certainly in favor of the structure that's being proposed, but I can't sit here and say, it's all looking good, because I think a better case can be made that it might not look so good. So I want to be on your side and be cautious but supportive. So it's like, okay, let's start thinking about Plan B. What are the backup plans if things don't go the way they should?
Sure.
That's where I'm coming from.
Yeah, I would appreciate your concern, Board Member Joseph. It seems like we should always have a Plan B in mind in case things don't turn out as we project them to do. I'm comfortable with moving forward, though, but I do appreciate your point. We need to figure out if it, we served on this council when and the district at that time when we hit that recession, and we had to make some difficult decisions. Part of that was laying off 8 people. Yeah.
Excuse me, Chairman Garcia, I just remind the board, this is the preliminary budget, and we'll be back into September with the final budget.
Very good.
We'll have more information, hopefully, at that time.
Yeah.
And get a better sense of where things are headed.
Very good. We look forward to that.
One other request then would be that in addition to that final budget in October, before we pull the trigger, so to speak, could you come back to the board and say, okay, here's the latest numbers? Basically, address some of my concerns before we go out and recruit, that kind of thing.
Definitely so.
Okay.
Yeah, that would be remiss on our part not to come with that. Really what we're asking for tonight is to get to get your support for this change in the department in terms of how it it supervises itself and provides that oversight to our employees.
Yeah, I do appreciate. I think we all do that level of supervision that you're requesting. Board Member Washington.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess I look at it. I constantly hear myself saying the same thing over and over and over, and I think that I look at things a little differently. I don't typically always look from a financial standpoint, and I know, Ken, that's your wheelhouse. Board Member Joseph, that's your wheelhouse. But I often come to this looking at it from an operational standpoint. And if I sat in this room right now with the people that are in here, I look around and I say the only 2 SMEs that we have in here are our 2 chiefs. And I like the model that they are presenting, not only because they're the one presenting it. I've had opportunities to see how successful the model that they're proposing for us to consider. If I want to go build a house, I can sit to the council or the board and listen to how we're going to pay for it or not pay for it. But I'm going to go to a builder, and I'm going to have that builder explain to me what I need. And I think right now we're in a situation where we already have a track record of what our fire district was like in the past. We've asked our current chief and chief of the end of the week, that's going to come up, to put us in a situation where we look at things from an innovative way, from a new thought process to make our city safe from a fire district standpoint. and also include in that to have forward thinking. And a lot of times we do get wrapped up in not paying attention to what our SMEs are saying. And we get caught up into the financial piece of it. My wife wants a big purse. And I think I've even heard Councilman Oral mention about, hey, look, sometimes you just got to pay the money to get what you want, to have a peace of mind. I think our city needs to have that forward same type of thinking and looking that, you know what, we have two excellent people that we've entrusted into making those decisions. And also in those decisions, we are entrusting that they are going to be good stewards of the money. You know, they have a great person in yourself, Ken, calculating. I have a problem when I hear we have these red flags up. There's always going to be a red flag, you know, and what we have to do is put that trust in these two guys who I believe have the best interest for our city. I believe that the battalion chief, once you understand their roles, you will understand it's very different than having an assistant chief, or very different than a chief from an administrative standpoint. So again, that goes back to the SMEs, understanding the model, understanding how that is going to be more productive, more helpful for not only us as a board, but also the residents. You know, a battalion chief is on, they are on the streets. They are boots on the ground. You know, totally different than your admin or your chief or your assistant chief, which are both important pieces. I just think that if you guys could do a little bit better job later on, some one-on-ones to explain that model. It's kind of difficult when you do it in an open forum like this, but spend some time with the council or with the board to explain that model, give some benchmarks of how other cities have used this, how it benefits us from our even neighboring cities to have this kind of position. I get it, and I really would like our board members to understand that totally, and not just look at it from a, you know, well, it's just going to cost too much. You know, hey, I go to Costco all the time and I spend too much money. But the benefits of what I do when I go there, I see it at the end of the day. And that's what the board needs to see, is that at the end of the day, this is what you're going to get, you know, and stop worrying about, you know, the what ifs.
This board, if I could, Mr. Chair, this board has made some pretty tough decisions over the course of just me being here with when you made that leap of faith with regards to putting the 6-0 staffing on the street. And you did that, and you chose to spend down your reserves to do that because you saw the need. And I guess what I'd like to say to you this evening is that we are at that next threshold that we're needing to go through. But I also believe that board member Joseph is grounded in what he's saying with regards to the financial piece of it. We can't sustain, and you've heard me say this before, we need to be able to sustain what we do here in the district, and it would be not a good move for us to go out there and commit to something that we can't sustain. We believe that the revenue that we're seeing, even in spite of the fact that there's going to be a potential downturn in the economy, we believe that the revenues will get us close to this number. And waiting, you know, for 3 or 4 more years till we know for sure that we're going to be there, the need isn't going to go away in the 3 to 4 years. The need's today, and I've talked to you, all of you, about that need currently in our department. And so I think these are the tough decisions that we all are being given the responsibility to make. You're the policy makers, and Chief Bellier and I are the ones that are supposed to carry out that policy. We need to come to you with the right numbers, the right information to be able to support that. It fits with what board member Washington's saying. We can do a better job, give you more information to take you to a place where it will be a little easier to accept the risk associated with this. Mm-hmm. But what I want to tell you is there's a risk already that the district is accepting based on how we currently staff the department and provide services. Okay.
Thank you. I think that's certainly broadening the picture for me on it. And I appreciate the discussion. I do appreciate the financial side of it, appreciate the operation side of it. And ultimately, it's about how we provide service in the city. I just think for me, it's checking in on the how the financial picture is going, and certainly understanding more and better the operation side of it. Yeah, because I think sounds like to me it's a matter of a staffing level and an oversight from a supervisory level to be able to coordinate efforts and provide the service and maximize it. Any other conversation on this? Okay. That being said, haven't heard from Councilman Oro or Vice Chair, Board Member Oro or Vice Chair Abadamos, but if they have any.
This is Board Member Oro.
Yes.
It's a little tough to hear all along, but I've been listening intently, particularly the last part of this conversation, and had a number of conversations with Chief Bellier ahead of this, so I had a good grasp of it. And I want to thank the staff for preparing the report. It was very thorough, much more thorough than it has been in the past. Helps me understand the enormity of the word. Enormity is the right word, but it's more substantive than it has been in the past. And it's because of where we are standing today in terms of the investments that we have to make. It just so happens to coincide with rising interest rates, economic uncertainty, and what we could possibly be in right now is a recession. But while I respect some of the conversation about preparing for that, we have to invest. I saw this city 10 years ago meet the economic, or maybe 12 or 15 years ago, maybe 10 years ago, meet the economic challenges of the Great Recession. We cut staff, we did things, we made ourselves meet that economic moment. But at the same time, I also saw the city really slow down and not invest in itself and build, where other municipalities and around us began to invest in other things. And I'm talking about in terms of development. We basically stopped becoming a city and just kind of sat here and held ourselves back a little bit, whereas other jurisdictions, I'll look at Napa, invested in their downtown area, and they were able to ride a boom, an economic turnaround. And I think in hindsight, it's 2020, it's very hard to see those things. I think that we're going to come into a period of possible some economic disruption, and I think that's going to have to play out, and it may be uncomfortable for a while. But I don't think it stops us from investing in the safety of this community. And I think we've had these discussions over a year or so that there is a process there to improve our fire district. There's changes that we have to make, not with just equipment, but also with how we staff this place. So I'm looking forward to more detail around the next round. I appreciate the first preliminary junction, but I'm in favor of making investments for a more safer community and a better fire district. Thanks.
Thank you. Any further discussion needed? Just go ahead.
Mr. Mayor, I haven't spoken yet, so I figured I'd give you my 2 cents as well.
Sure, please do.
As you are well aware, you and I already heard this presentation as through the Finance Committee, and so we already had the opportunity to talk to the chiefs and ask specific questions. One thing that I'm not sure if it was mentioned or not that may help ease Board Member Joseph's concern is that these numbers don't include any or developments on the Broadway district. So we have more property tax that's coming in potentially that we haven't even budgeted for, and that should also help provide more stability and income to the fire protection district. I agree with Board Member Oro on this one. I'm in favor of growing and continuing to grow our level of service when it comes to the fire district. Look at what happened to us recently with COVID. We needed our men and women on the front lines more than we've ever needed them before, and they were being exposed every single day. And now we've had a ton of overtime over the last few years because of the coronavirus pandemic.
Mhm.
So if I'm hearing from our chief that there's a need, and I'm also hearing from our chief that he believes that we can afford this and that we will be able to sustain it. So I'm leaning in favor as well.
Thank you. Any further discussion needed by the board? We do have a resolution on this.
I just want to add by emphasizing I get the concept and the value of the battalion chief and the structure. So it's not what's being proposed, it's the fiscal consequences. And I think if we spend some time tracking and monitoring that, that will give me the comfort level I'm looking for. And it sounds like we're going to get that. So I will make that leap of faith as well, because I do think it will make for a better district. And, you know, we keep an eye out on where things going. I think there are a lot of opportunities where we will get more revenue than we think. And who knows, maybe we'll come up with a better version than Measure L and get some revenue again. So.
Okay, very good. Is the board prepared to make a motion on this resolution?
So moved.
I think.
Yes,
but,
let's give it a
I'll second it.
Motion second?
Yeah.
That's adopt a resolution of the Board of Directors of American Canyon Fire Protection District adopting the preliminary budget for fiscal year 2022-23. Okay, we have a motion and a second on this. Roll call, please.
Board Member Joseph,
Yes.
Board Member Oro,
Yes.
Board Member Washington,
Yes.
Vice Chair Abudamos,
Yes.
Chair Garcia.
Yes. Thank you, board members. Moving on in our agenda.
Thank you.
We have the item 16, Fire Chief Employment Agreement. Consider and a possible approval of Fire Chief Employment Agreement between the American Canyon Fire Protection District and Jeffrey Bellier, effective July 1, 2022.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, this is related to action you took in your closed session, which I would summarize briefly with respect to the then version of the agreement which was attached to the board agenda. You dealt with amendments to, for example, Section 3A1, which is correct, and providing for 9 months severance under the agreement. You dealt with Section 5.1. I think that's agenda page 312 in the packet, to set forth a 4-step level of compensation beginning at $214,240 a year. Both those actions were unanimous and recommended changes or clarifications by your board. And they also modified Section 7 to provide that when the chief was not at headquarters, that the assistant chief would be present, recognizing the need of the chief to perform duties outside the district, but also for the need to have an officer, supervising officer at headquarters. That change was approved by your board 4-1. So with those changes, that would modify the proposed agreement that's in the package. Again, this would be effective July 1, which is consistent with your past direction of June 6, concerning the employment of Assistant Chief Bellier as District Chief. That would be the summary of the actions that you took, unless there are questions.
Questions from board members?
No question here.
All right. Board ready for public comment? Hearing no objection. Anybody from public wishing to comment on this item? Okay, do we have anybody in the queue online?
No, we do not.
I will close public comment and return to council for further discussion, desired action.
Well, if there's no other comments, then I will take the great honor of being able to make the motion that we approve the employment agreement as amended.
I'll second it.
Motion is second. Roll call, please.
Board Member Joseph?
Yes.
Board Member Oro? Board Member Washington?
Yes.
Vice Chair Abudamos?
Yes.
And Chair Garcia?
Yes. Thank you, Board. This has concluded our business items for the evening. We have a Fire Chief oral report.
That's me, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Still for a couple hours?
Yeah, until the end of the week.
Till the end of the week, till Thursday afternoon at 3. I guess what I'd like to say, first of all, this is my last Chiefs report. It's a lot of my last things here in American Canyon, but I want to thank all of you, frankly, those of you that are here in attendance and those that are on the phone, and the board members for their support and for your allowing me to come to your community and be your fire chief. Thank you. Appreciate it. And that goes to you, Marion, also, for taking the opportunity to have an old fire chief be your fire chief for a while.
Seasoned.
You're never going to live that down, Marion. That being said, I want to also thank the members of the department for their accepting me into their midst. For the district staff, Mr. Ross, my right hand, Martha, who makes us look really, really, really good. All of us, and that includes the board. She's an amazing asset to this community and to the fire district, along with Laura Provencher, who has taken on the role and responsibility of being the district's PIO, and is doing an amazing job with that. I want to thank the firefighters, as I said. Ken Campo, who has been an amazing team player and asset to the district, and certainly someone who I have grown to appreciate his skill sets in doing just what he did tonight, bringing confidence to our financial side of the house. CERT. Pal, Beth, you folks are amazing. I've told you that since the day I got here. This community is so fortunate, frankly, to have the people in the CERT program here in this community. I've been associated with a number of different CERT programs in my career. I've never, ever, ever worked with a CERT team like this. You folks are amazing. And I'll include the chairperson in that group. And his all the folks in CERT are this community. I really hope that it appreciates the fact that you folks do what you do for American Canyon, because it's special. I know I'm going to forget some folks, but I guess the last one I would like to thank is the fellow next to me on my left. You got the right guy, okay? Jeff and I hit it off a while ago, and I'll just tell the story real quick. My son's office at the county is right next door to the fire chief's office, and I was visiting my son right after I came to work here. And I made some comment to him about, isn't the fire chief? I just walked past his office. It's like, and he goes, yeah. I go, can you introduce me to him? Type thing. And I said, he goes, well, yeah, I guess. And anyway, so I went and knocked on his door, and I walked in, and we sat down and we talked for a while. And it was like, the connection was really good right from the get-go. And when he decided that he wanted to come back to American Canyon, I was very surprised, frankly. But the more and more we talked, the more and more it became apparent to me that he was the right person for this district and for this community. And I feel really good about the fact that I'm leaving the keys to the office and to the district in his hands. So anyway, thank you very much.
Oh, well, thank you, Chief Cahill. We certainly, you have a wealth of wisdom and experience that you have shared with all of us. And I think that's really, really been important. And above all that is simply your demeanor. You speak from the heart. And that matters to all of us. And it shows up in the effectiveness of what we can get done. So, yeah. No, I think all of us would appreciate the same thing. Thank you. We're going to have a bit of a ceremony for change of command. There'll be more of that.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to Thursday afternoon. I've done that in other departments, and as I keep telling Jeff, just sit down, put your seatbelt on, and just let it happen, because it's a good thing for you and for the department. It's a little different. He's not used to that. I wasn't used to it when I went through it in the city of Woodland, but it speaks a lot to the organization. The whole transfer of command process is ceremonial, but it also it shows what you're made of. It shows what the district is all about. So, in this community. So I think it'll be good. Thank you.
Thank you. Moving on to share board comments, committee reports, or future agenda items. Anything?
Yes, I have one suggestion that might be relevant given tonight's situation, is that we recognize there may be a need for a Zoom meeting every once in a while if some of our members can't be here. Yeah. And in talking to the board council, it's a relatively simple matter to throw the resolution about, I don't know, well, I may call it a simple matter, others may not, but to throw an agenda item on that authorizes those Zoom meetings for a month at a time. So we might want to think about including that when we know that at least if all 5 board members can't physically be here, it might be worth considering the Zoom option, because apparently part of our problem was that we didn't authorize it for tonight, and so that created the problems. So as an operational suggestion that...
It's a good thought, board member Joseph. As long as we got COVID in the background, we may want to consider that.
So you could give that direction, and that resolution would actually confirm the use for the next meeting, right? Okay. So
we need any motion to do so?
I would make that motion. Does that mean, okay, so we're saying tonight, authorize it for next month, even if it turns out we don't need it,
even if it turns out you don't need it, it'll be on your agenda. You can exercise when you the chief then is putting together the agenda. There could be a decision about that. Okay.
Well, then I'd make a motion that we...
Is that something that we can put on consent like we did for every single meeting?
Yes.
Is that what we do for the city?
Yeah.
Or is that no longer a thing?
Yes. Yeah. I would make a motion that we include as a regular consent item language to that effect, authorizing a Zoom meeting, even if, from month to month we don't always need it. It's worth it just in case.
Yeah, I'll second that.
I'll second that.
Point of clarification, does it have to be COVID related?
I'm sure it's...
No? Okay. All right. Then it's good. Motion second. Roll call, please.
Board Member Joseph?
Yes.
Board Member Oro? Board Member Oro?
He may have left.
Board Member Washington?
Yes.
Vice Chair Abu Damus?
Yes, and we got a message from board member Earl So I don't know if you can officially take that yes from Board Member Oro, but he did send it in writing.
I have it on my phone too.
Oh, good, she's got it. Okay. And I'll vote yes on that as well. So we concluded that item?
I got off that item, yeah.
Okay, you have one for a future agenda item.
Yeah, just real quick, I just want to kind of piggyback on what we were talking about with you, Chief Cahill. I just want to say I appreciate everything that you've done since you've been on board with us. And everything that you promised us initially, you came through. Everything from mentoring to a strategic plan to a plan to have succession. So I want to thank you for that. I think you did a great job with the mentoring, also with the teaching of the board. I think you were the first one to do a one-on-one class for all of us, and it's really important to know that you've taken the time to do that, and from doing that for us, and I see what you've done for Jeff. It's just amazing. I'm just honored to have been your friend and your board member. So thank you. That's it.
And before we adjourn, I would like to echo Board Member Washington's remarks said differently. I appreciate the expertise, the experience, in particular, the fact that you've been able to work in this county and kind of blend all the fire chiefs to start thinking as a unified thought, and the political opportunity that comes from that. To me, that strategic visioning is exactly what I'm looking for in any manager, be it fire, city, or who names it. And in that regard, the other feature, you seem to have fallen in love with the community. I don't know how to say it differently. But it occurred to me that that is really that quality that we need to look for in our executives. I've never been able to describe it until I saw it in you and said, that's the difference. That's what we're looking for. We want people to fall in love with American Canyon, because once that happens, it's like selling a car. Once we know you fell in love with the car, we know you'll do what it takes to do the right thing. I'm going to stop talking because I'm pretty sure I've gone way past any good point.
Can I get a raise? I got 2 more days. Can I get Can you double my hourly rate? So it's like, come on, Mark.
Okay, no, I thoroughly appreciate your
love
time
fest.
here. I appreciate my time with you, and I only apologize because sometimes I go too far.
We'll make note of that, I think. But thank you, Mark. All right. That being said, if there's no other thing, so
Mr. Mayor, can I make some comments, please?
please do.
Thank you. I guess, Mr. Chair, I apologize for that. Chief Cahill, I feel like I can't let you leave without saying something, especially since you keep on calling me out for thinking you were too old to be a fire chief. In all fairness, I'm not ashamed to admit I probably didn't know what to look for at the time of your hire, and I feel like I've learned so much from you, through you, about the Fire Protection District. We are so blessed to have found you. You've done amazing work for us. I agree with every single thing that my colleagues have said, and what Board Member Washington said, especially in regards to everything you promised you would do, you delivered. So thank you. I don't even know why I'm wasting time thanking you, because I feel like your work with us is not over, and I don't really think we're going to let you go too far. But thank you so much for all of your work. Thank you for everything you've done for us, and thank you for finding us Chief Bellier. Your confidence in him makes me feel better moving forward. So we'll be in touch. Don't worry, I'm not going anywhere.
Thank you, Marion. And you know that my ribbing you is really out of, frankly, an appreciation for the fact that you've become one of my biggest allies, and I appreciate that. It's been a joy to work with you and all the board members, but you in particular because of how we started. So that being said, it's.
Asking questions. I think you assumed that I was being skeptical or critical, but I was asking questions. Now you know me, and you know that's my nature. I just ask a lot of questions.
Yeah, that's true. And I think on the flip side of that, I think you know me better now too, and realize that we're on the same team. So, yeah, it's been a real pleasure working with you. Thank you very much.
Okay. Anything further from the board? Well, then we have concluded our business for the evening. We are adjourned. Thank you.
Good night, American Canyon.